beyond happy. I'm beyond happy to be here with you guys today. My name is Laura. I'm a fourth year medical student from Brazil, and today I've partnered up with the brilliant Marilena Conte to host our second Telling Our Stories patient encounter per session. And by that, we mean patient encounter experiences that change not only our daily practice, but the way we see life and deal with challenging situations. So, Maddie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. Good morning from the West Coast. I'm Madalena, of course, and I'm so excited to be here with Dr. Kittleson and Laura and have a discussion all together about reflecting off of the story that Dr. Kittleson shared. So really excited to be here.
So our goal today is to reflect on trust in the time of COVID. And as suggested by our super special storyteller today, the one and only Dr. Michelle Kittleson. Dr. Kittleson, thank you so much for being here with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about something that you like to do apart from medicine and from being a mother of 3 kids?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle Kittleson. I'm a heart failure transplant cardiologist at Cedars-Sinai in sunny Los Angeles, California. And I always say I'm really only good at 2 things, cardiology and cooking. I actually am famous among my son's friends for my exceptional brownies, blondies, and peanut butter cookies. So that's my other secret talent. Things I'm terrible at: understanding sports of any kind and parallel parking.
Oh my God, I relate to you so much. Sports and Laura were just like 2 really different, we can't relate. And I don't love cooking, but I love anything that is sweet and that has sugar on it. So amazing. I remember something from the last time that I saw you, Dr. Kittleson, that you said that your dad was or is, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, a cardiologist, and that you wanted to rebel and not be a cardiologist, but you fell in love with it and couldn't rebel that much. And something that caught my attention at the time was that you said that you can that you something that you emotionally can deal with is people passing away from cardiac diseases. But I would love to know like a little bit more about that, if you feel like reflecting on that with us today.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say I picked cardiology really for 3 reasons. I actually fell in love with cardiology as a intern, and I remember being in the CCU. This was back in the olden days when angiograms were actually on film, and then the fellow had to know how to thread the film onto the projector and flap, 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 spin, 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 and it would show on the wall. And all of a sudden they projected this coronary angiogram. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can see coronary, Latin for crown. It looks like a crown. I can see the outline of the heart, these beautiful, and I just fell in love with the heart, and the pathophysiology totally made sense to me. I didn't feel like I was memorizing all kinds of disparate facts that had no relation, like with rheumatology or oncology. No offense to those amazing specialists, but it just made no sense to me. And I love the fact that the history and the physical matter. You cannot diagnose unstable angina without a history. Your exam can be totally normal. Your labs can be normal. Your EKG can be normal. You could have a thrombus on the precipice of the ostium of the LAD causing unstable angina. You've got to talk to the patient. And I love the physical exam matters. You can't diagnose decompensated heart failure without a physical exam. BNP this, BNP that, I don't care. You need to examine the patient. So I love that. And then finally, as you said, how patients die. I never knew there were so many awful ways to die until I did my oncology rotation. And for some reason, it was just, I couldn't wrap myself around just the gruesome stories. Now, not to say there wasn't triumph of hope and faith and family and support, but somehow I had a hard time shutting it off when I went home. Whereas with cardiology, for some reason, it just, I can accept it. And yes, there are tragedies in cardiology. The young person who has a viral myocarditis or sudden cardiac death, but somehow I maybe because the pathophys and the treatments made so much sense to me, I could reconcile when things didn't work out. So that's really why cardiology was the perfect fit for me.
That's beautiful. Actually, today here in Brazil, it is Cardiologist Day. It's a beautiful coincidence. And I just
What
want to
timing?
thank. Yes.
That's amazing.
And so I just want to thank everyone that dedicates their lives to taking care of our hearts. And the last thing I want to say before we dive into the story is just to invite everyone in the meeting here today to unmute, ask questions, share your thoughts, because the more you interact with us and share your own stories, the more interesting our session is going to be. And yeah, now, Maddie, do you want to say anything before Dr. Kittleson starts?
I think I just need to respond to Dr. Kittleson and say your passion for cardiology is truly infectious. And I think everyone here was just so engrossed by just you describing your love for this. So just thank you again for being here. And just your passion is so clear. And I'm very excited to hear the story you have to share.
Thank you. All right, I guess I'll begin. Okay, so the story I'm going to tell, when I was honored to be invited to do this, I gave Laura and Maddie a few options, because I write essays, medical essays, narratives about, generally I find that if I have a patient interaction that troubles me, it's often helpful for me to write about it. And if I write about it, often by the end of the writing exercise, I kind of have a resolution, or I understand what troubled me so much, and it helps me process it. So actually, this story I'm going to tell you is based on an essay that I published in the American Journal of Medicine in 2020, and it was called Trust in the Time of COVID. So I'll tell you the story about this patient. So to set the stage, this gentleman had been my patient for, maybe a decade. He had an ischemic cardiomyopathy, but very stable, really no symptoms, well managed on medical therapy. And an older gentleman in his late 60s, and a lovely, courtly man, South African accent, which always charms me, and knew his wife. So it was wonderful. And I remember we had a really moving interaction, actually, in around 2015. Actually, the reason I remember the year so well is he went on vacation to Italy, and while in Italy, he got severely short of breath and called me, and I'm like, gosh, there's not much I can do. You're in Italy. I think you should go to the hospital. And he went to the hospital, and they found he had, a pleural effusion basically obscuring an entire lung. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like heart failure. It's a bit, and they took out 4 liters from his right lung. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And it turned out actually he had a B-cell lymphoma manifesting at this huge, so he was in the hospital in Italy for about a week, and I couldn't do much, but he called me every day. And the reason I remember it was 2015 is we kind of arranged the times with the time change between Los Angeles and Italy, where I'd call him at 7 a.m. And why do I remember? Because my second son was about 3 months old at the time. So I'd kind of time it where I drove to work, set up my pumping, because I was nursing and pumping at the time, and got on the phone with him, and I'd multitask. I'd pump, and I'd talk to him, and then I'd start my round. So I still remember, so it's 2015. But he got through that, and he came home, and when he came home, his wife gave me this huge hug, and she had tears in her eyes. And anyway, his lymphoma was cured, it was fine, his heart was never the problem, but we had this really special bond, not just because he'd been my patient for 10 years, but because he had this crazy episode in Italy where I just talked to him on the phone every day, having zero to add, because as I just told you, I know nothing about oncology, but it just mattered to him that we connected. So fast forward to 2020, and now we're in the midst of this crazy pandemic. It's March 2020. I remember Friday the 13th of March in 2020 was the day, at least here in California, everything went crazy. That was the day my children's school closed down. No one knew when I was going to reopen. And that's all the supermarkets were in disarray. It was a crazy time, right? And shortly thereafter, And at this point, I was seeing the guy about once a year. Check in, you look great, see me in a year. Yes, you can go to the Mediterranean and sail around. Yeah, go see your grandkids, live your life. So this is now April 2020, and the President of the United States at the time had a press conference talking about how amazing hydroxychloroquine was. And I was like, oh no. Because anytime there's a press release about anything, patients start calling your office. So I was steeling myself, I'm going to get calls. And he was one of the patients that called. And he said, I would like Dr. Kittleson to prescribe me prophylactic hydroxychloroquine. And I figured at that point I'd one of two options. I could say, ha, I'm a cardiologist, talk to your internist. Or I could answer the question. And I figured I owed it to him, given our long-standing relationship, to answer the question. And so I went through with him. I said, no. I said, no, I will not. And here is why. Number one, I am not convinced it works. I think there might be some pathophysiologic potential, but it's not been borne out in practice. There are potential drug interactions. I don't want to prolong your QT. You're already vulnerable. And what about all those people who actually need hydroxychloroquine for their rheumatologic conditions? Another thing, as I told you, I know nothing about. But yes, rheumatology, they need their hydroxychloroquine. I'm not going to give it to you. But I expected him to be like, okay. I didn't expect him to be angry. He was angry. And he said, well, if you won't give it to me, I'll find someone else. Click. I was so shocked. I mean, yes, do patients get angry with me sometimes? Sure. You don't tell someone what they want to hear. But coming from him, coming from this guy, we'd had such an amazing relationship. I knew his wife, I knew his kids. I did not expect that. And I thought about it and I said, why? Why is he so angry with me? And I realized he was angry with me because he was scared, right? I mean, it wasn't personal. It rarely is, right? As an aside, I kind of treat anger and praise from patients in the same way. Meaning some patients get angry with me for what I do. Some patients think I'm their savior for what I do. And I might treat them both the same way. It's a reflection more on the patient than you. And I try not to change my practice dramatically based on the feedback I get and just always do the right thing regardless of the feedback I get. But in this situation, it would bother me. So I said, okay, he's scared. I treated him, I presented him with facts, beautiful, logical, clear facts, but I didn't address his fear. So, and I realized that, and I remember that when he was in Italy all those years ago, I could do nothing, but I kind of comforted him. Just my presence was comforting. So because of that, I circled back to him a few days later, and I said, I get why you're really scared. COVID is scary for you. This is April 2020. No one knew what was happening. No therapeutics existed. No vaccine existed. And so I understand why you want it. I understand you're afraid of dying from it. I think you are at risk of a bad outcome from COVID. But I can't give you a medicine driven by fear. I have to make my medical decisions not based on fear and emotion. I have to make them based on science. And I hadn't changed his mind. He still wanted it. He told me a few days later he got it from some other source. I made him promise in any case not to take it without calling me. At least I could set him up for a follow-up EKG or something. But the conversation ultimately ended with him saying to me, "Are we okay?" And I really respected that on his part. And so it taught me a number of things. It said, number one, when a patient is angry at you, don't take it personally and don't react back with hurt or anger, but figure out why, because it's rarely about you and more about what's going on in their lives. Number two, be open about risks and fears. It's not worth giving a false reassurance. In fact, he calmed down more when I addressed the elephant in the room and said, yeah, this is really bad and something bad could happen to you. And then the third thing I think I learned is, the art of saying no means that you do the right thing regardless of the feedback you might receive. You defend your position. You do what's right, what you feel is medically right. And you remember that as a physician, we have to be guided by facts and not fear, facts and not emotion. And I like to think about lots of other cautionary tales in medicine. The three examples I always think about is, PVCs, premature ventricular contractions, are bad after myocardial infarction. But if you get a medicine like flecainide or enconide, or the now defunct enconide, to suppress PVCs, you increase mortality. Or you think about and high A1C, hemoglobin A1C is bad in diabetes. But if you give a medicine to lower the A1C, like a thiazolidine-dione, you can actually make heart failure worse. Treating the surrogate endpoint didn't help you. Or you take someone who has, give them estrogen and their lipid profile improves. But then we know that on balance, the risk of pulmonary embolism and breast cancer may override the benefit in the lipid profile in someone, postmenopausal women on hormone replacement therapy. So I think of all these cautionary tales in medicine where our focus on surrogate endpoints in the absence of hard clinical data led to bad outcomes. And that's how I try to treat my patients. So if hydroxychloroquine had no benefit, I have to go by the science I know rather than speculation I don't. And then I like to do a thought experiment. I say to myself, what if a year in the future, hydroxychloroquine was actually proven beneficial and he got COVID and died because I didn't give it to him? On the other hand, what if I gave him hydroxychloroquine and he got fatal VT and passed away? Which would be worse? It would be worse if I gave him the wrong medicine for the wrong reason rather than operating under data I didn't have at the time. So I think doing those thought experiments taught me, face a patient's fear, be open about it, but don't act on it, and always make your medical decisions based on facts. So that's the story I wanted to tell.
I love your story, Dr. Kittleson. It is a delicate one, but I believe that many people have faced something like that in 2020 or from 2021 and etc. But I want to say that I write about things to understand how I feel about them too, and it really helps. And I actually remembered something about trust that Dr. Penehis Galeazzato said in our last patient encounter purpose session. He was emphasizing the importance of developing a sense of homophily. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it is for the patient to recognize us as one of their own. And I believe that we're going to face cultural, political, and other types of differences with our patients. But underneath it all, they just have to know that we're humans too. And I guess that sense of belonging, it kind of relates to trust. And for that reason, I think that it makes them feel like we will not abandon them, that we are with them, even if we disagree, which is what you have gone through. And Maddie, do you wanna reflect on something?
Yeah, I think what's so powerful about this story to me is it kind of boils down to how do you maintain trust with a patient despite disagreements, which is just such a difficult thing in any type of relationship, whether it's doctor-patient or really any other types of relationship. So I think it's just such a powerful example of how to do that. And I think, as you just described, COVID, really caused such polarization and really put some strain on that trust, especially in, as you illustrated, the patient-doctor relationship. And I'm really curious to hear your perspective on, COVID is clearly, it won't be the last time that trust is strained in the doctor-patient relationship in medicine. So how do you think, this particular patient experience maybe impacted how you will try to navigate future disagreements in other settings?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Yeah, and I want to amplify something that Laura said too about feeling the belonging, feeling that that you and the patient share certain things, like you share fear, you share vulnerability, you're both going through this together. And I think that's important to a point. I mean, there's always that tension in the physician-patient bond of how much of yourself do you share. For example, if you walk into a patient's room and they say, "Hey, how are you?" It's really nice. Some patients actually ask how you are. It's so lovely. But my response is always, "I'm great. How are you?" Even if I'm not great, I say, "I'm great. How are you?" Right? Because there is that level of, I need to present to you that I am competent and I am capable and I have my stuff together. Like, I know what I'm doing, even if, life is in a disarray. So there is that fine line where I want you to feel like I understand you and I understand where you're coming from and I empathize and sympathize. But on the other hand, you can trust me because I am the authority figure for your medical care. I am the expert for your medical care. And I think that's a tough balance. But I think it's important to achieve. It's important to maintain the empathy, but still that boundary of being the expert that they can trust for medical advice. And the second thing I'll say is, what I think I've learned when a patient disagrees with you, the goal is not to win. It's always, that's the tendency. I want to win. I want to win this argument. The goal is consensus. And I always try to emphasize two things to the patient. Number one, I only have one agenda, and that's your care. I'm not getting kickbacks if I give you the COVID vaccine. I'm not getting a bonus if I don't prescribe hydroxychloroquine, right? I have no ulterior motive or agenda. I just want to treat you the best I can. And then the second thing I really try to emphasize is, I'll still be your doctor if we disagree on this point. I will still be here for you. One phrase I like to use is, my definition of shared decision making when I speak to the patient is, you're the boss of your body, I'm the medical consultant. I will give you all the facts and tell you my opinion on the best approach, but you will decide what's right for you. And I think that's helpful because winning as opposed to consensus means you don't go in circles forever too. I mean, you can get in this thing where they say something and you're trying to convince them, and then you're having the same conversation over and over again, which is actually distressing and stressful, I think, for everyone involved. So at some point I say, I get it. We disagree. You've heard where I'm coming from. I've heard where you're coming from. Let's make a plan moving forward. And I think that's important too. And then the other thing I always like to do is circle back later. I think circling back is so important. I had this patient once who came to see me, and her LDL, she had no coronary disease and just no heart. I see general cardiology patients too, so no cardiomyopathy, no heart failure, just wanted a second opinion primary prevention consult for coronary artery disease. And her LDL was 200. Impressive, yes? I said, you need a statin. This is like a no-brainer. 2019 ACC-AHA primary prevention guidelines, 2018 ACC-AHA cholesterol guidelines, LDL greater than 190 equals statin therapy, high intensity for a 50% reduction, sold. She said, no, I will not take a statin. And she got really angry with me. And I'm like, something's not quite right here. She's crying. She's angry. She's like, she left my office. I'm like, this was out of proportion. Something's going on. So 2 days later, I just called her on the phone. I said, listen, we had a really fraught interaction, and I feel badly about it. I still stand by the fact that a statin is the right thing for you, but listen, you got to do what's right for you. Tell me your thoughts. And she said, I'm so sorry. I'm just so scared. I'm scared that I'm going to die right away because my heart's bad. I'm scared that if I start this statin, my friend had muscle aches and I'll be like bedridden and never be able to get out of bed, and it's going to paralyze me for life. And all this stuff hadn't come out at first. And then we were able to talk through. Did she end up going on a statin? No. But it's okay, right? Because I said, we monitor you, you try these other things, et cetera, et cetera. There's not only one size fits all in life. And it ended up to be a much better discussion. So I think that you're not trying to win. You're emphasizing the medical facts and your only agenda, which is to help. You're going to reassure them. You're going to be there for them no matter what. And you will circle back when the emotional dust settles to figure out what else is going on.
Yes, that's actually brilliant. I'm gonna take notes of the idea of circling back, and because like the patient emotions may just calm down, and they may feel like talking, and even like changing their minds. They don't really need to change their minds, but listen to what you actually have to say, because just what you said, your only agenda is to take care of them. And something that about vulnerability, I was going to talk about that, but I feel like I sound like Brené Brown, but but it's true. Something that I practice in my, actually in every relationship of my life, including the physician patient one, is just to trust in my eyes. The way we look at people, I believe that we say so much with our eyes. And so some emotion, I mean, we wear masks so they can really like see our whole faces. If I smile, they can see that. But I believe that we can show emotions, and I don't mean in emotions like anger or anxiety, but empathy and kindness, and even like rawness. I don't know if rawness is the right word, but vulnerability, like to say that we share this space of fear, but we are experts in that case. And I feel like if we are open in the way we look at them, it may be a tool to develop trust in that relationship. In that case, you were on the phone, but I believe that in general, this is something that we could try to use and be actually show that we're also real. We don't mean to establish this wall between us. And yeah, I just wanted to share that thought.
I'm so glad you brought up masks. I think masks are a really important thing, right? When the pandemic started and we were all wearing these masks, I'm like, it's over. I'm never going to be able to connect with my patients. I mean, I often have to walk into a room to a brand new patient in a hospital and say, time for a heart transplant evaluation. You're going to stay in the hospital. You're not going to leave until you get a transplant. And that's a huge thing for a stranger to walk into your room and say to you. And I said, how am I going to establish trust if I can't even see what the patient looks like? And I'm actually extraordinarily surprised with how much we can actually still convey without seeing a patient's nose and mouth, and how you really get a sense, like if the patient isn't buying what you're selling, right? If you're saying something and they don't like it, I think it's still very clear, even when they're wearing a mask, when that's happening. There's often a sidewise glance at the caregiver, loved one in the room. There's a stillness as you're talking, as if they're kind of gearing up to say something back. There's a little tightening around the eyes. I mean, there's still all these micro expressions that you just can feel, and you can still connect in that way. So I absolutely agree with you. The second point I want to make based on what you said is the eye contact. So I'm a huge believer we have electronic medical records, of prepping my notes in advance. I am a stickler. I mean, my assistant knows you don't put a patient on my schedule unless I've got all the records I need in advance, because I'm usually a second or third opinion consultation for advanced heart failure, and I will review 100 pages of records, and I will painstakingly put that note together with everything I know about the patient's past history and what I projected plan is, and then that's why when I'm in the room with the patient, and I'll, might type a little bit as I'm filling in the cracks of when was your defibrillator and stuff like that, or how are you actually feeling now? Can you dress or shower without shortness of breath? But once I've typed in that little stuff that I'm filling in, then I sit down and I look at them. And because I don't need to be writing, I've already known everything. And I think that makes a huge difference. No talking while typing. Is it more work on the front end? Sure, but it's actually less work on the back end. And I think it's more fruitful work, rather than saying to the patient, when was, do you have a defibrillator? I know they have a defibrillator. Do you have cardiac arrest? I already know they have CRT. Really knowing the medical facts that I don't need to ask them about. I can ask them, did CRT make you feel better when they upgraded your defibrillator? That's what I want to know. Stuff like that. So I think part of that building trust and building a relationship is preparation. If you know everything about the patient before you walk in the room, and the eye contact which you can make if you've had preparation in advance. I'll tell you a great story. So a lot of patients get referred for heart transplant evaluation from other parts of the country. Maybe other centers have turned them down, so they come to Cedars-Sinai because we are a large program and quite aggressive in our risk-taking with great outcomes. So this one patient was referred to me for up in Seattle. I reviewed all her records in advance. I prepped everything, and the records are, of course, beautifully detailed because she'd already been through a lot of the process before. And I walk in the room, and it's her husband, and her son. And I walk in the room, and I looked at her son, and I said, "Hey, you must be Ellis." I changed the name because, patient privacy. And she lit up. The 7-year-old lit up. The husband lit up. How did I know the kid's name? Because I reviewed the records and I mentioned it in the records. But just kind of a little thing like that, she had this sense of this person cares about me. And of course, we all care. But part of it is selling yourself and showing the patient that you care, a demonstrable evidence so they feel like they are important to you. And for me, one huge way to accomplish that was that preparation and attention to detail that allows me to know about them and allows me to communicate directly with them and use my time wisely. I actually often don't spend a lot of time in the patient's room. A lot of my partners will block off an hour for a new patient consult. I only block off half an hour. Why? Because I don't need all that time to know the history. I've prepped, and I think it helps the patient too not to repeat a story 100 times they've already told, but just get straight to the meat of the matter. So anyway, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I actually have a book coming out in early 2023.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Oh my gosh, this is the first time I've actually announced it here, late breaking on CP Solvers. You guys hear it?
Wow.
I love it.
Oh my gosh.
Tell us a little bit about it.
So it's a book sort of based on my philosophy on the unwritten curriculum of how to effectively care for your patients. It's not about science. It's about the art of medicine. It's going to be published by Springer sometime in early 2023. It's going to be called Mastering the Art of Patient Care. And really, the reason I so much of what I'm telling you right now is like I'm snippets from the book. So I think that's exciting. But I think the point to make here is there's so much you learn, these tips and tricks that just come from doing things wrong. And if you do things wrong, you figure out quite quickly how to do things right. But I always say the best way to learn is to learn from other people's mistakes, not your own. So I'll say everything I'm telling you about preparation in advance and making eye contact and sharing your fear and trying not to win and building consensus all comes from mistakes I made from inexperience earlier in my career.
Yeah, this is why I love listening to stories. It is such a brilliant moment. I'm sorry, Maddie, you wanted to speak?
No. I was just going to say we will be the first ones to purchase this book.
And make sure all your medical schools, all your residency programs, buy a copy for every trainee.
Yes. Something that I remembered also from Dr. Penahis about details is that he always checks the birthday of the patients, and so he just finds a way of like in the middle of the conversation, he just says, "Oh, April 22, you're gonna be able to pick up your kids in school. You're gonna be fine." And then the patient goes, "How do you know it's my birthday? It's my birthday." And it's just like this little moment of feeling seen that I think it's so important for everyone actually, but in this setting of extreme vulnerability, it is amazing that pay attention to this kind of thing. Maddie, do you want to add something? And anyone in the chat, if you have questions, you can also unmute yourselves.
Yeah, I'll definitely just say anyone in the chat, feel free to unmute. I just wanted to really echo Dr. Kittleson, one thing you said about how you say to the patients, or kind of the mindset that you have is, you are the boss of your own body and I'm the consultant here to give my medical expertise. And you just outlined, how much preparation you give into giving, that best expertise. But I think that's really just sometimes a trap that, I'm just a medical student, but I think even this early on, it's a trap that I can see how easy it would be to fall into, where you come in with, this is the plan. I'm the doctor. I'm the one to tell you what's going to go down. And I think just constantly reminding yourself of, yes, you do have your expertise and you need to do the preparation and share that. But ultimately, it's really working with the patient to figure out what do they need, taking into account their fears. And I think that's something that really stuck with me, that I think is just such an important thing to remind ourselves of. So thank you for kind of laying that out for all of us.
And I have two. You guys, every time you guys say something, you inspire that I want to tell you another story. I would say, there are certain situations where I absolutely feel the patient is making the wrong decision with potentially catastrophic, life-threatening consequences. For example, I had a heart transplant recipient who, after transplant, we do routine scheduled heart biopsies, protocol-driven, not based on symptoms, just to look for surveillance for rejection. And they're generally, sometimes once a month for the first month, and they get spaced out. I mean, it's usually a internal jugular central line. You put the little catheter down, it takes about 15 minutes. It's not that uncomfortable, but it's not fun, right? It's an invasive procedure. And I had one patient who said, I'll only agree to one biopsy in the first month. I said, well, we need to look for rejection. He said, I don't care. I'm only getting one. And there was a level of anger and a bit of distrust. And I said, you're the boss of your body. I can't force you to do it, but I have to be at peace knowing that I've explained to you the consequences of this decision. I don't agree with your decision. I think based on my experience, it is not the right decision to make. I think you're putting yourself at risk for potential rejection. And I hope we can continue this conversation as the weeks go on to discuss any problems, ways I can make it easier for you, and then continue to move on. But I think it's very clear. I tell them they're the boss, but I also, if I feel that they're medically making the wrong decision, I'm honest about it. Because I have to be, right? That's my job. It's like I tell my kids, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. And it's kind of the same thing with patients. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I think you need to hear, recognizing I'll always be here for you, but this is what you need to know. And I think that's hugely important. The other story I wanted to tell you guys, so Laura mentioned, connecting with the patient and what that cool thing your attending did, which I am going to steal now and use for my patients about the birthday. So when I was a fellow, there was this one attending who always did the general cardiology consult service. You had to present to him, and he was such a cool guy. He was an older doctor, and he had great history and physical exam skills, and he had great clinical judgment. He knew the name of everyone in the hospital, the janitor to the CAO. He'd say hi to everyone. This was a big hospital. He'd been around, and he was interested in everybody. And you knew if you presented a patient to him, better tell them where that patient was born and raised, because he would want to know. And then he'd pull the atlas off his bookshelf in his office, and he'd open it up and say, Mount Airy, Maryland. Well, that's kind of close to Baltimore. I wonder, blah, blah. Oh, you take I-95, whatever, to get there. And then when we go and talk to the patient, he'd connect to them in some way. And I have to say, I've taken that on. I ask every patient where they're born and raised. I found someone who was from my hometown in Connecticut, even though I live now in Los Angeles. And you hear some really incredible, amazing stories. So I think just having that instinct, to me, it takes very little time to say, where were you born and raised? Who do you live with at home? What kind of work do you do? How many kids do you have? Grandkids. And I like to put all that stuff in my note. It takes so little time because I've already done all the, past medical history stuff in advance. So I can take that time and use it to connect in that way. And oftentimes a patient who's so stressed out because they're coming to see the heart failure cardiologist, when they can just relax and talk about who they are for 30 seconds, it kind of calms everything down, I think, in a really nice way.
Yes, I love this. I'm that kind of person, and I'm actually curious. I actually want to know about people's lives. So every chance that I have to ask where they're from or anything that's just particular of that person, I believe that it makes them feel seen and feel special, and makes them feel like they're something that Dr. Penny said, that makes them feel like they're your only patient. And I think that's the difference. I think we're getting close to the end of the session. If anyone has any questions or want to say anything, if not, I just, Maddie, do you want to say anything?
No, I think, Dr. Kittleson, I have taken so many just kind of practical pearls away from this. And I know that the book will be filled with thousands more. So I'm really excited for that. But just thank you for taking the time to share all these stories. The last pearl that you shared, about like doing a lot of kind of these pearls are taken away from doing things wrong and how you can learn from other people's mistakes. I think that's also key. So just really thank you so much for being so open about these stories. And I know I'm taking so much away from this.
Yeah, me too. I really want to thank Dr. Kittleson. Meeting you, like every time I see you, is just a really good time. You have this infectious energy that I love. And it was amazing. I loved your stories, and I'm looking forward to reading your book when it's out. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maddie. I'll see you soon.
Bye. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.